We can't say the future without AI. I mean, there's no way around it. 50% of workers now believe AI is going to improve their experience. When I come into the meeting room, I need a way to incorporate my AI with what's going on in the meeting. It's almost a bring your own AI type of a concept. Most of what we do in our day-to-day is going to change significantly.
Hear the latest AV trends and predictions in this episode of Crestron's Smarter Spaces podcast on your preferred podcast platform.
It's got to be a heck of a challenge. Do you buy now and stock up on the resources that you may need? Do you budget for that increased cost if you're integrating or looking to innovate down the road? Or do you just, stay complacent, figuring that this is just a wave that's going to ride itself out and everything's going to solidify and things will be back to relatively normal fairly soon?
Hold on, this is no time to be hysterical.
It's the perfect time to be hysterical.
Should we be hysterical?
Now! Yes!
Maybe, but not right now.
Welcome to AVWeek, episode 710. We're going to be talking about tariffs, how they're impacting professional AV, where we're getting the next generation of AV employees, and yes, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to make classrooms just a little bit better. This is AVWeek, episode 710, Tariffs and Professional AV. Don't panic, people. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to AVWeek, episode 710. If you've noticed something right now, it's that this is not Tim Albright's voice. My name is Patrick Norton, and I'm in while Tim is doing the vacation thing this week. But fortunately, to make up for Tim's absence, we have a fantastic crew of people joining us here today. Willie Franklin, who has retired from Otterbein University, but is still doing DJ and events. Willie, welcome to this week's episode of the show.
Thank you, Patrick. Always great to be here.
So I'm going to ask, has the thrill of retirement passed yet?
Oh, no, absolutely not. Every time the alarm does not go off, I love it.
I covet that whole concept. Jenny Hicks, ladies and gentlemen, joins us from, I'm going to say it, Jenny, Dis, England. I have verified that it is Dis, and I am delighted by that. Group Head of Market Intelligence of the Midwich Group, bridging the gap between manufacturers and technical professionals. Is it spring yet where you're at?
Do you know what? Today it was pretty close to spring. It wasn't raining, which is pretty rare for the UK. And there was some sunshine, but you still needed a coat.
That sounds about... I never realized how far north England was till I was on a rugby tour there and realized that I needed to buy a jacket immediately getting off the plane. Goodness, George Pappas is the CEO of i5 LED, getting bespoke direct view LED displays out into the world. I miss Northern California weather.
It's a beautiful place. I enjoy the northern better than the southern. It's a little slower here, a few less people. The beaches aren't as nice, but, we have Lake Tahoe right down the street. So
the surf breaks are really empty compared to Southern California, and you can surf and ski in the same day, which is something I really miss about Northern California. Goodness. I feel like everybody's feeling the spring. We're all in a good place, and I'm just going to completely destroy the joy everybody has right now by leaping right into our first subject of the day. It's a four-letter word. It's spelled tariffs. SCN got into tariffs on avnetwork.com this week. Tariffs and pro-AV expectations and strategies. For reasons of not shouting, I will, on behalf of Tim and everyone at AVNation, ask everyone to treat this like a hailstorm, like something that came out of the distance that you cannot stop whether you like it or not, and not get into broader political discussions. I'll just leave that there to just sit sadly in the corner, especially given the landscape of what we're dealing with right now. The tariffs are on, the tariffs are off. There's going to be a huge dog pile of levies coming on April 2nd. People are labeling it. Well, people are labeling it. I'll just leave it at that. Let's talk about tariffs, how it's impacting the industry. SCN got big into the idea of the fact that 60% of the U.S. supply of aluminum comes from Canada. I thought it was fascinating that they were really, really obsessed with aluminum, which I thought was an interesting point to take. But, there's a whole lot of stuff that's about to get more expensive, assuming the tariffs aren't pushed, assuming they don't get changed, assuming there aren't negotiations. How is everybody feeling? Does anybody want to volunteer to wade into these waters first?
I'd love to, and my views may be a little unpopular. We manufacture both in China and Taiwan, and so it's not so much on the aluminum side. I don't use as much aluminum, casting products, but if it's a finished good, it's transformed into a different tariff code, right? So looking at that, but in the U.S., we've had the luxury of no VAT of sorts and all these other things that every other country's just used to. And so I don't think it's as big a worry as some people, because it's worldwide except for us. We were just used to the no or very low tariff. And then there's the other thing. If we look at history of years past, we had the same immediate change in tariffs, and everybody had the frightened look on their face and thought that they weren't going to be able to buy milk because your direct view LED screen went up 20%. But within a short 6 months, that all subsided. And I think that we'll have the same wave this time, where it'll be a short scare and then equalize out like most things do. It won't be the tsunami. It'll be more like, the tide going up and down.
Hear, hear, George.
Unpopular view, by the way.
I don't know if that's so unpopular, George. I personally feel like it's within the wheelhouse of most people's thinking. For me, I have to wonder what AV integrators are thinking. At one point in time, there was panic, there was chaos, thinking about the disruption of supply chains. And then chip shortages became a real issue, and now tariffs is a real issue. And for those who are into craft beers, particularly in retirement, the cost of aluminum cans go up. So my time out to relax is now being impacted.
Just got to move to growlers.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, but seriously, it's got to be a heck of a challenge. Do you buy now and stock up on the resources that you may need? Do you budget for that increased cost if you're integrating or looking to innovate down the road? Or do you just, stay complacent, figuring that this is just a wave that's going to ride itself out, and everything's going to solidify and things will be back to relatively normal fairly soon? Fairly soon is yet to be defined, but we'll see how it shakes out. I can honestly say, as a retiree, still dabbling in that AV integration space because I do a bit of consulting, I don't worry so much about the tariff and the cost of aluminum because my projects currently are like one-off. So I'm no longer doing volume buying. But for those who are still in that environment and putting in those big orders, I'm certain there's a bit of concern. Hopefully we'll see it pan out and it will not cause a tremendous amount of disruption, but it'll just cause people to think about their workflow and their budgeting processes.
It's also interesting to watch people as they try to negotiate the idea that it's paid on the price at the border, not the final retail sales price or, whatever price. Jenny, you're working globally. Are people panicking? Are people ignoring this? Are people pointing their finger in the general direction of the United States and laughing? There's no wrong answer here.
I don't know that they're laughing. There's a fair amount of anger in certain parts of the world. So I think with the biggest part of this for me in AV is Chinese component. So, however, if this was happening and we hadn't had the post-COVID chip shortage, I think we'd be more worried. But actually, everyone's a bit fatigued by supply chain issues now. We had COVID, that slowed down the demand. Then there was a chip shortage. Then we had this response to the chip shortage of this incredible overstock of the market, which has made us fluctuate and resulted in a soft market in parts of the world for the last sort of year and a half, that quite frankly, this is just one more thing that everyone goes, well, nothing we can do about it. What it feels like to me, during that chip shortage, a media player manufacturer told me that what had previously, a component that had previously cost them 20 cents was now $5. They needed 12 of these chips in their player. So this tariff isn't going to make a huge difference. I think it's going to be well within the margins of manufacturers being able to swallow. The interesting part will be who moves assembly. So it's the complete product charge, particularly from China and Mexico, actually, that's going to be a problem. So with that, we've got who's going to price themselves out of the market, or who's going to move assembly to the States and thus incur the same amount of higher cost anyway because of the cost of labor and premises and so on. So I think everybody feels that it's unavoidable. I actually think I would rather be in the States for this movement because everyone's in the same boat. I'm expecting, particularly in like high-end TV and the more consumer panels, to see some of those Chinese brands realize they're no longer competitively priced for North America and flood the rest of the world with the stock by diverting it elsewhere where they can be competitive. So, the TCLs and people like that, these big panel manufacturers who, that ultimately compete on price with the other big panel manufacturers and are going to be disadvantaged. So I think it's going to be a really rocky 2 years whilst we figure this out. And the biggest problem at the moment, no manufacturer wants to say what their plan is in case someone else has a better one. So they're all waiting to see what other people do to then gauge the reaction of the industry.
Waiting to see which penguin gets shoved into the hole in the ice first to see what's underneath there. No, it's one of the reactions, that I think has been interesting for me to process is, I work in the marketing department over at CTI. I spent, supply chain issues were incredible for this industry. I also, I spent a lot of time talking to people about home theater and consumer audio, and the number of times I had to explain to people why they couldn't find a subwoofer, which was a conversation I feel like I had 150 times in 2.5 years, because nobody really understands how supply chains work in the modern. Well, okay, everybody in this panel knows. Most people listening know, but it's amazing how people don't really understand that just in time means it's not here until it absolutely positively has to be here. And if it's on the wrong side of, the ocean, we have significant problems, right? And for some of the reactions I got was, this doesn't scare me. COVID supply chain issues created me 3 years of nightmares. 2008, that was a problem. We can buy the stuff. We just have to pay more for it. I can make that work. George, you have a thought on that? Or
a whole bunch of thoughts. So quickly on aluminum, there was actually an abundance of aluminum components and extrusions for our industry, kind of already in warehouses in the U.S. So, that's been a sales tactic of some people right now. Oh, we have it tariff free. How long will that last? How fast will everybody run to the shelves and buy their water before the, storm hits, kind of scenario. Some of them are taking a small advantage. I mean, we just bought some trusses for a project, and we bought it local in the Bay Area, in fact. And the warehouse is packed with truss, and they already increased the price by about 10% from, 2 months ago, just because they could, right? So at least it wasn't the 20 or 60%. But then on the component side, because I love manufacturing, that's where my heart really lies. And when I saw the chip shortages, we've always tried to have multiple types of components. So you look at our BOM, here's 5 different chips, especially in the capacitors. I know if you're a Xilinx or Altera kind of person, kind of hard to just swap out one for the other. But the manufacturers that had zero part integration from different manufacturers and different specs were the ones that got hurt the most, right? And I think a lot of them learned, though, that, we better be a little more flexible because we could run out of parts. So I do see that this time that people, if you're talking to them, they talk about, substituting different parts to avert some of these things. And then on the bringing manufacturing, back to America, on onshoring or reshoring or whatever the new word of the day is. I was at a conference last week. Robert Herjavec was there. I don't know if you know him from Shark Tank, but he talked about it, and I don't think he really understood manufacturing as much. He's more of a software guy, but it was brought up and he was asked. Then he thinks that America could never compete with China because of the labor cost. And I don't see it as the labor cost because you can be so much automated. For us, it's more the regulations, right? So that's where we're really going to get hit. We could build for the same price that you could anywhere in the world if we didn't have the regulations. Our power cost is actually less than China, right? Our land costs, yes, is more than China, but we could do it fully automated. But we also don't have the subsidies. So we don't have the government coming in and saying, well, if you buy all this automated equipment from this other Chinese company who's building it, we'll give you a free loan and give you millions of dollars to open up a factory to keep us busy. So that's where, the differentiated is in, we don't have that kind of government support and, we have the regulations. If it weren't for that, I think there would be a lot of American manufacturing, which would change the whole world landscape.
We'll know more in 2 years.
We'll know more in 6 months.
I think the funny part of that is that the last couple of years, so many manufacturers, their sort of plan and pitch to everyone has been global pricing. So we're going to offer this global pricing for your global rollouts, and we're a global business, and you can buy at the same price wherever you end up. And we've created this network of specialists to do that. And that now all goes out the window because 25% is huge. So how can they guarantee those global prices? So that there's loads to figure out with this. But I think, it can also present an opportunity. And if you look at the chip shortage era, there were a handful of companies, one AV over IP company that did so well. They were verging on loss making in order to do it, just grabbing components from wherever they could at whatever price they could to continue supply. And it worked in their favor. And they're now 4 times the size and a major player. So hopefully there's some brainy people sitting in some rooms somewhere figuring out how to make this work for them, work in their favor.
No, it's I think there was a lot of lessons learned that nobody really wanted to learn during COVID. But I think one of the things that certainly the AV industry learned was if you can't ship product for 2 years, you're going to lose market share in a dramatic and measurable way. All right, let's shift gears a little bit. I feel like this is the eternal question in commercial AV, professional AV. ISE Managing Director Mike Blackman and AVIXA Chief Global Officer Sarah Joyce say the AV industry's number one issue, getting new folks into AV. And it's because the industry is growing too fast, and of course nobody knows that AV is a career. I don't think anybody will argue that people outside the AV industry need to know the AV industry exists. And if you think I'm wrong with that, fire out right now. But, I've heard people argue that AVIXA's numbers, which are pretty spectacular, like 30% growth in a relatively short number of years, are a little aggressive. But I don't think there's any doubts that, the AV industry, especially here in the United States, spends, more time in many cases poaching people from one another than actually bringing people in, training them up, and creating career paths for them. I see heads nodding if you're watching the video. Who wants to join in? Who has thoughts?
Boy, do I have thoughts. I don't think we're growing them like we used to. And I say that from a standpoint that I feel like myself and many others came out of the womb with a desire for AV. You just tinkered and you dove into it. In some cases, you discovered it accidentally and it became a passion. But to that end, I'm starting to believe that the greatest threat to bringing new people into AV is innovation. Technology is so user-friendly. It's so ubiquitous. It's, for a lot of people, it's almost a no-brainer from the consuming standpoint, not from the expertise standpoint. So when you have this huge swell of consumers, in there are tiny little dots of people who are excited about how it works, how to engineer it, how to bring it all together. If we could shift that in some measure, and I think it's going to just come down to having conversation with people that we meet, people that we know, people that we work with, to get them excited about going into the field of AV or IT. Because if we're only talking about it from a user standpoint, if we're only singing the praises of the new features and functionality of a tool, I don't think that's going to be enough to get people excited to go down that rabbit hole.
So the excitement part, if I could just jump in really quick, I think is a key factor, because I'll tell one of our little secrets, and now everybody will do this, but we look outside the industry instead of poaching, and we're going to, I'm not saying these other industries aren't great and necessary, but one of our technicians came from a company that does escalators, right? So he's working on escalators and elevator computer boards and programming them and testing them. And it can be hard, ugly work on top of, the computer aspect and the control side. So now we have a person that understands logic, understands computers, looks at circuits, understands how to use a multimeter and ohms and connectors and software, a lot of things. And those industries actually train people very well. So that those trades in those other industries are great, but they're not exciting. So it is a little easier to get them over to us, right? And say, look at, you can put this huge direct view LED screen up and this whole sound system, and interact with a customer instead of running out because an escalator is broken down, and they just don't care about anything but getting it fixed. So I think our industry needs to really push on the excitement level of going to whatever installation it is and seeing what you've created, because we're creators. The AV industry creates sound and pictures and things for people. Most consumers don't even know there's an AV industry, right? They see it everywhere, whether it's in retail, hospitality, sports, or a conference room. They see it everywhere, but they don't know that's a huge. If you asked them about AVIXA, they would not know what that was, right? So we don't have the trade schools that some of these, ITT tech kind of places and any of those. We do have very good resources within the industry, but it's very siloed within the industry. So that's what I see. We need the excitement. People love to come and do this.
I mean, people love, home theater and better phones and stuff. Do people outside of the trade show really know what the Consumer Electronics or the CEA does, the Consumer Electronics? I mean, thinking of parallels to AVIXA, right? The CEA, everybody knows about the CES show because it shows up on every platform on the planet in January when they're talking about all the new shiny objects. Do people really know about the CEA and sort of what goes in? I mean, I think people know about engineering on a very vague level. Like, I want to design phones. Okay, I want to design, I'm just asking, partially because I have a teenager and I would like him to be gainfully employed sooner rather than later. But I mean, Willie, I think there's always been kind of a natural path for hungry college students to start dragging cables around in exchange for tuition or food, And also, George, I have to say, is having been down underneath an escalator, I can totally see clean assembling of monitors, of panels, being so much better than crawling under an escalator. Yeah. I mean, much respect for both jobs, but And then that is another thing, obviously, looking outside of the industry. But, Willie, is this do you find this being a problem, or did you find this being a problem, finding people to work in AV in colleges and universities?
Absolutely. Now, the students that we hired definitely appreciated the income of being student workers, but there were very few that really were excited about the AV environment, right? And for those who were, they got turned on pretty darn quickly. For me, it's all about giving people that opportunity to have hands-on. I mean, I think about a couple of young ladies who work for me that were art majors and had the opportunity to run audio for a live event in which the president was live streaming. Now, it was easy for them to assist me in the load-in, and it was terrifying for them when I got out of my seat in front of the mixing console and asked one of them to take a seat and run audio. And there was a little short tutorial, and I did it intentionally to show them how exciting it could be to control the show.
Sure.
But I also wanted them to have the opportunity to really immerse into the process and not just be gophers of hauling gear. A few afterwards really took to it and even migrated away from art to Apple to become Apple experts, working at the local Apple store at the Genius Bar. Others kind of still played around in it, still excited, but not quite committed to it. And I think it may have come down to, what do I tell mom and dad? My tuition's being paid as an art major. I don't want to go home and say, hey, I want to do tech. But we really have to figure out ways of making those connections meaningful and not just have people operate on the periphery. I applaud the gentleman to go from escalators to the AV side. I worked with an HVAC technician who got turned on to electronics after repairing a heating and cooling control system. And we just talked about what that circuit board was telling that system to do, because I had no idea what the furnace was doing, but I could tell you what that circuit board was designed to do.
We need a bit more targeted recruitment then, don't we? So the escalator guy, the air conditioning guy, it's all, we need to broaden our job titles so that people are landing on those jobs when we're recruiting for them from other industries. And I think maybe we're a bit too specific, and we've done this to ourselves because of our nervousness around the consumer industry and people saying, well, why would we need you when we can just, pop to a Best Buy and get most of this stuff from there? And then also against IT, who make us nervous because they find it very easy to recruit graduates. Anyone that's interested in technology, that tends to be the route they're taken down through their education. So unless they already knew they wanted to end up in AV, they're going to head over to the IT side, most likely. And we're afraid of that. It's a different way of working. They like open standards. AV does not, because there's no dark art for us if that happens. So we've segregated ourselves and said we're special. And we think we're so special, we put AV in front of all these job titles, and we're missing out on these people who might naturally find us. And I suppose the biggest thing is marketing. Because you talk about, how do people know about CES? How do they know about these companies? It's on your Facebook, it's on your LinkedIn, it's on consumer social media, not just siloed in the sort of professional LinkedIn space. So we're not loud enough. And the biggest problem is who's going to own being louder and who's going to spend the money on being louder. And that's, until we answer that question, it's difficult to move forward. But I also think we spend a bit too much time focused on college students and leavers. And actually, they've already started their path. They've picked their subject and they've got an idea, and the university's got an idea of jobs they can apply for immediately after graduation. We need to be hitting the high schoolers to say, did you know this is a possibility? And if you're off to study engineering, there's another section over here that you could come and work in. If you are a physics major, but you might end up being a satellite dish installer or something at the end of it, there's another industry for you here as well. So we've got to highlight where that interest is already there. Graphics designers would love to be in this industry because we make their stuff look cool. There's a lot of ex-musicians, that their understanding of audio is so good, their ear is so good, so they're great people. And I think that's the bit, finding that passion for video content, audio, and then showing them that there's an industry for when they finish their artist career, whatever it is, come over here and use those expertise. They say the best salespeople of interactive displays are ex-teachers, and it's the exact same thing.
I'm going to use that as a quick pivot and into a bit of self-promotion for AVNation.tv. One of the articles we had up last week was talking about the best practices when designing and maintaining hybrid classrooms. And I can now, Willie, I can address your entire recent retired career. George, you can talk about big panels. Jenny, you can explain why people want big panels as teachers. This is great.
Yeah. Gosh, who wants to jump onto that one? Because as I read the article, I find myself asking, okay, how relevant is that for me now? 3 years removed from it nearly. And I guess it's still relevant. How did I go about managing it and making it work? And I guess I entered it from its infancy when distance education was a thing, right? And you didn't have students logging in individually. You had an entire class joining another class, or different universities linking. So you studied together as a collective, and that was exciting. And with that came the development of more hybrid, certainly online when we look at COVID. But much like the article pointed out, I think the big challenge to all of it now is how do you keep it relative, right? Because you have faculty in some cases who are used to being a sage on the stage, that face-to-face contact, the nonverbals, and now they're online. Yeah, and then it goes even deeper from a business standpoint. College is a business, or universities are a business. Accreditation is very important to that. How do you ensure attendance needs are being met? Because a person log in doesn't necessarily mean the student is actually in class, right? How do you address issues of safety and security? We had students come to us during COVID who wouldn't turn their camera on because they didn't want any of their classmates to essentially see where they live or what their living environments were like, or because there wasn't secure login approaches in some instances. Maybe you had a harassing partner that you didn't want to log in and arbitrarily see you on camera and get a sense of where you were located. From a budgeting standpoint of managing it and keeping it afloat, I figure it's in line with everything else. Innovation, automation, replacement, in some case you rip and replace. I don't know. I feel far removed from it now because it's not my every day or every week or at least once a month strategic meeting thing.
It's the same as the corporate market went through off the back of COVID. So there was this rush to install whatever kit was available as quickly as possible to video enable spaces so that people could work where you couldn't work from home.
Right.
And in compulsory education, we saw a similar movement of how do we get the teachers to be able to talk to the kids at home. Most universities already had some form of online teaching capability or at least lecture capture, so they were a bit further ahead. What I think we've seen happen in the corporate market is that rush to enable those areas. Since then, we've gone back, and the reason we've seen continued growth in UC&C is because people have then perfected their solutions, and they're still doing so. They're going, right, okay, this wasn't good enough, so what is good enough? Now we know how we've settled into hybrid working. And higher ed is probably headed for that now. And for me, the biggest thing they need to think about is that the teaching styles of individual academics is different. So you can't put one hybrid classroom in and go, this is it. This is what's going to be available in these 6-7 lecture halls, and you must all use this and love it, because they won't. Some of them will, and they'll adapt to it really well, but they're not. They all teach differently. So, I mean, I read the article and I thought of two things. I pictured in my head one of the really super hybrid classroom examples where you've got like the 65-inch screens and there's one head or two heads on each of them, and they have the multiple cameras and mics and spatial audio speakers, so you turn and you get eye contact with the student that's at home. And then I realized that one of the biggest problems with that is the academic is typically still facing all of the students at home and all of the students in the room. So there's no interaction between the students, which is what you would get if they were all in. So that's the equity that's lost. And I wonder if that could be fixed by, so initially I thought, well, they need to sit the same side as the teacher. No, wait, that won't work because then they're facing the wrong way. But you could fix this with a mirror or repeater screens, couldn't you? And then everybody sees everyone.
Meta, of course, would suggest you just put everybody in a headset and create a completely virtual environment. But I have a complicated relationship with technology in classrooms, partially because I worked in some in inner city schools, and I was on a panel at one point, and somebody was like, we're getting tablets into the schools, and actually this was even before tablets. We were talking about, we're getting PCs into the schools, and it's going to change everything. And I'm like, hey, quarter of the students I worked with were functionally illiterate, and I still haven't run into a Windows, or for that matter at the time, an Apple computer that you could actually operate without having a fundamental ability to read and write, and type. And so the solution to that was removing reading and writing and making everything a touch screen in some locations. And it's been curious to watch that. And it's been, because as I've, again, complicated fields, it has been fascinating to watch how many different ways, especially in higher education, this has been implemented, where everything from, Jenny, the room you were describing with, 23 cameras and lots of monitors and a staggering, initial upfront cost to, there's one PTZ camera, there's one projector, and there's really no representation of the students that are outside of the room, unless they're coming up on on the speaker system that taps into them. And woe unto you if one of them decides to turn on a Metallica record in the background during a lecture.
There's different levels, and it depends on how much somebody wants to spend. I mean, really, the technology is definitely there to make it very interactive for both sides. I can speak a little bit more on the corporate training side because we have a lot of experience the last 2 years with that. We've done multiple locations. One was a home builder, right? And so they're training all of their people. They're having a class every day, right? And 1 week it's their real estate people, or one day it's the real estate people. Next, it's their project managers and their safety people. And we built a room for them that, caters to their needs of the people that come in, and then a few remote. And then we did another huge training center where people come to pay to learn something. And there's 150 to 200 people in there. They do have remote sessions for the people that don't want to fly all the way to Scottsdale because they're coming from all around the country. We put a 45-foot long, 10-foot tall, 1.2 millimeter direct view LED, so they can use it in every which way. And they have 4 remote cameras. They have a full-time, operator. You can see on Zoom all of the attendees, right? So it's very sophisticated, but it takes a lot of operation. And you're not going to get that in colleges, which they have enough money, they should be able to do it. But they're just not willing to spend that money there, right? But I'm seeing in the commercial space, they want people back in. They want people in the rooms. So the rooms are bigger now, right? And they're brighter, and they're making them more attractive. So you have all these different pieces. You have to make them not only bigger, brighter, more space in between people. That means, you move away from projectors into direct view. It means you really need those cameras that can track the speaker because you ask somebody in the audience and you don't have an operator. But the technology is definitely there. And now with AI, I mean, 90% of my meetings and Zoom and Teams calls, we use an AI bot to, give me a report and give me a to-do list, and these meetings are doing the same thing. So, but I think in person is coming back. The hybrid is there, but there's some people that don't want to drive to work. I deal with a few of those, and we'll always have those. I'm trying to have less of those. But the people that are motivated want to come in. They want to come in. They want to be there. If they really love their company and they really love what they're doing, they really want to learn, they're going to be in the seat.
As somebody who commuted in the Bay Area and had to go to a studio, I respect not wanting to drive anywhere around Sacramento during rush hours in either direction.
Yes.
But it has been interesting to watch, certainly as an AV integration company, watching companies fight back and forth over whether or not they need to prepare for more office space versus less office space and where they're going in the future.
There's some people that thrive away from the workplace, away from the crowded learning environment, and in some cases they physically can't be there, or their neurodiversity means that they won't cope or they won't absorb whatever that learning material is if they're in the room. So I think there's going to be a place for this no matter where we land on the hybrid preference scale, because we've identified that we can do it, and we already knew that there were some people who would benefit from it. So in the name of accessibility, it will happen and it will continue to improve, maybe not on the scale that we saw immediately after COVID. But George, you said something before we started recording the podcast about, is there a red light to tell us if we talk too much? That's what's missing in this training classroom environment, isn't it? So if you are the presenter, if you're the trainer, what you get in the room is atmosphere. And atmosphere and reading people tells you if you need to change your teaching style and what your level of engagement is, and when you need to spot that person who's fiddling under a desk and go, let's ask you a question to bring you back into the room. So if we could have that above these, thumbnails of us in meetings, in classrooms, anywhere, saying engagement lost, this person's switched off, I can tell by their facial expression, or you can't see it, but we're fiddling, and maybe a total class score based on level of engagement, and then you can adjust and you can read the room in the same way. So I think that there's still quite a long way to go in terms of innovation, and AI will play a big part of it.
I think there's some of the tools out there right now that actually can tell if you're, watching the screen, it's seeing your eyes, but you could watch the screen, but your screen could be off to the side. You could be a thumbnail up here and you could be typing something, right? And a lot of the software does give that engagement feedback, right? So you can tell who was engaged, who wasn't. I mean, I think there's a lot more technology, and this is where, is AV, and in our world, are we the right people to teach and to promote all of these, features? Because, I think our industry is still a little segmented. There's some guys that specialize, in the video part, and some guys the audio part, and some guys just the integration. They just want to pull cables and throw things on walls. We're starting to see it come together, but until more people come together as one, you're not going to be able to teach people on the outside what's possible. I love all aspects. I'm better in the video part, especially direct view LED. I use LCDs. I love the sound part of it because it's part of it, but I don't know it as well. But it's there. I think we're there. I just don't think we're, as people, have sped up to the technology. The technology's finally passed us up. And with AI, it's going to even be harder for us as people, as humans, to keep up with the technology.
To compete.
No more stick shift.
Well, the running joke here in St. Louis is the best way to make sure your car doesn't get stolen is to have a stick shift.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really silly till I actually heard someone go, "What's that?" And then they had to be explained what a stick shift and a clutch pedal were. Fortunately, my children will not have that problem.
Though they can be boastful amongst their friends.
Well, they learned how to shovel when they were 5. There's just a certain base level of engagement with the universe I think is necessary in the next generation of humans.
Yes.
Call me old-fashioned, but ladies and gentlemen, Willie, Jenny, George, thank you so much for making the time for AV Week and joining us here in episode 710. I want to thank you all. We have links to where everybody works. I will find a proper link for you, Willie, for the DJ services for anybody in the Columbus area that needs a little live entertainment.
Franklin DJ Services at gmail.com. It's the fastest way of getting to me.
Jenny Hicks at the Midwich Group, bridging the gap between manufacturers and tech pros. And you may have noticed George is working at i5 LED, dealing with direct view LED displays, and they are very, very pretty if you have not seen one.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for joining us in AV Week. I'm Patrick Norton. Thank you all for listening.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
Hello, this is Steve Greenblatt, host of AVNation's A State of Control podcast. Each month, Rich Fregosa and I explore trending topics related to control programming and automation in the audiovisual industry. We speak with a variety of AV professionals who share their perspectives, knowledge, and experiences. Please join us for this monthly conversation. Check out A State of Control on avnation.tv or wherever you get your podcasts.